Page 2 now, the 2016 race for the White House. Troubles for Team Trump. The Donald is distancing himself from campaign manager Corey Lewandowski and his staff. Instead, the GOP frontrunner just hired some well-known Republican fixers, including a new strategist and Scott Walker's former campaign manager. There's also a former senior party official now on the team with expertise in the rulemaking process for contested conventions.
The next 4 or 5 weeks are going to be very exciting. And we start, we'll bring it home. Thank you. Thank you, man. And we start on Tuesday. So big. And you know, the interesting thing is with all the primaries that we've been through, years and years and years of primary, sort of either over or not very important by the time they get to New York, right? New York is so important. It's so important. Like New York should be so important. And I see what's happening, and I see the polls coming in, and I'm so honored because the people that know me best are the people from New York.
We are here this evening at a time of crisis for our nation. We're bankrupting our country. Our constitutional rights are under assault each and every day, and America has receded from leadership in the world. And yet I am here today with a word of hope and encouragement. I want to tell you something incredible is happening all across the country, all across the state of New York, and all across this nation. People are waking up.
Meantime, the Republican National Committee is holding its spring meeting next week in Florida. Officials say they'll steer clear of any proposed convention rules changes, well, for now. However, things could change come July's conference in Cleveland. Joining me now from Southern California, Vice President of Axiom Strategies, Brandon Moody. So, Brandon, a lot of people are wondering what this campaign shuffle for the Trump campaign means.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people rightly are wondering why a leading presidential campaign is essentially having to hire a shadow campaign team to fix, maybe, patch some of the problems and holes that have been created and blown through during this campaign. It does make you question about what's happening here. You know, a lot of presidential campaigns at this point that are leading or are doing well, if you look at Mr. Cruz's operation versus Mr. Trump's, I mean, they're just night and day. And so a lot of campaigns that are leading at this point really have their stuff together. They have their processes, their orders, all that stuff in place. It does not seem to be the case here with Mr. Trump. It's just very haphazard. There have been a lot of mistakes made, and those mistakes that are made by him, they're not covered up, or maybe not even covered up is the right word. They're not, fixed. They're kind of doubled down on. And so I think what's been seen here is a desire for them to create a shadow secondary campaign operation to fill some of those holes and gaps.
Yeah, it's never a good thing when the media starts talking about internal campaign conflict. It's just, we need to focus on issues. But do you think that the new people that he's adding to his staff, do you think that they will take him to the top?
Well, I know Rick Wiley. He's a nice guy. He ran Mr. Walker's campaign, and they ran out of money, and they had to drop out. I don't know. I think that there's a lot of reasons why it makes sense for Mr. Trump to do what he's doing. But, in the end, its campaign isn't going to be about who he hires or who he doesn't hire. It's going to be about ideas. And that's why what's what presidential campaigns really ought to be about. They shouldn't be about these backroom dealings and these processes. They really ought to be about who has the better ideas. And I think what you're seeing on the presidential, at least on the GOP side, is that instead of becoming a war of ideas that Senator Cruz is out there fighting about, you're seeing the Trump campaign out there fighting a war of process and whining about, delegates and all sorts of other things. And as a result, they're having to bring in people to help them fix some of these problems.
Yeah, and just last month, a black eye for the Trump campaign when Corey Lewandowski, was having issues with this reporter. Apparently, police have dropped the charges against him. So is this going to help Trump's campaign? Is this going to make him look better, or is this situation still bad no matter what?
Well, I think it's bad no matter what. I mean, of course, if you're the campaign manager or a senior staffer on a presidential level campaign, you don't want to make news unless you're making news for your boss in a good light. So if you're on TV, if you're in the media, you want to be talking about your boss in a good way. You don't want to be talking about yourself. You don't want to be talking about you committed minor battery. I think that those types of things, though, are going to fade a little bit, but they do add to the narrative that this is a campaign in disarray. This is a campaign that's had to hire basically a shadow campaign to keep itself up and running because, you know, there's just been mistake after mistake and a doubling down on those mistakes that are made. That's not what you want to see coming out if you're handicapping this race for Mr. Trump.
Yeah, I saw the video. I think we all saw it. And, you know, I didn't see much in the video from the beginning. And so I didn't know, you know, what all the drama was about. And that's basically what police are saying was there just wasn't enough evidence to convict him. But either way, you definitely don't want this to be the focus. But it turns out the Trump campaign is feeling very confident and comfortable. They don't believe that there will be a contested convention. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I would love to see the reports where they're saying that it's going to be not going to be a contested convention. I think they are going around D.C. saying that to some folks to allay fears, because there's a widespread belief that there will be a contested convention and that Mr. Trump's campaign is simply not organized in a way that will benefit him should there be an open convention and delegates being allowed to choose who they would like to choose. I mean, look, the RNC delegate rules have been in place for years, decades, and in some cases since the 1800s, you know, for some states. And so these are not secret rules. There is no rigged process. It simply requires organization and an effort on your campaign to be organized and do a good job at winning a contested convention should it come to that. You know, no one ever said, the RNC rules have never been set up for someone to win with a plurality. You have to win with a majority. And so the Trump campaign, in order to allay fears that they are disorganized and incapable of winning an open convention, are going around saying they're going to have the 1237 needed before that time comes. And I don't think that's the case. I don't think the math bears that out. They would have to really run the tables in places that they're just not going to run the tables in. You know, they were relying on these big wins that they haven't gotten. They got swept in Colorado. They lost Wisconsin. I mean, there's all sorts of reasons that point to that this potential fight at the convention floor is going to come down to two men, Mr. Trump and Mr. Cruz, and I think the best organized one will pull it off.
And really quickly, the RNC's spring meeting, what can we expect and what do they mean by they're not going to change rules?
Well, I think there's always going to be little fights over the rules, whether that be how exactly floor proceedings happen, what kind of, questions you could put to the actual order of things. There's all sorts of those small processes. And then now today I'm reading that potentially they're going to try and vote on whether or not they're going to operate under Robert's Rules of Order versus the old traditional way they have operated in the past, which is a slightly different version of the House of the Congress's Rules of Order. So, you know, all of those things are going to come into play, but I don't think there's any desire to change the rules in a drastic way. These rules have been set in place for a very long time, and all the campaigns have known them up front.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your information. All good points. And, you know, I would love to see either Donald Trump or Ted Cruz be our next president. I think they're both very qualified, especially compared to what we have on the Democrat side. Thanks again. Coming up, the controversy surrounding an exclusive ride service just for women as the Daily Ledger continues.